Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the 2v1 podcast. My name is Will Tannenbaum with my partners Henry Geller and Andrew Riemann. We have a good episode for you guys today. We're going to be breaking down the last remaining free agents and what we think would be good fits for them. We have our ideal plans for what we would like to see our teams do before the season starts as far as free agency goes and what we want to see in the season. So, Henry, why don't you kick us off with our first free agent?
So I think that one of the best remaining free agents out there is Justin Houston. And one of the reasons why I like Justin Houston so much is because I really want him to go to the Ravens. And it's a perfect fit for a team that needs some pass rush help and also some veteran support for younger guys like Jason Owe or Odafe Owe, Dalen Hayes, Tyus Bowser, and Justin Madubuike. And if the Ravens aren't able to nab him, I think that another good fit for Justin Houston would probably be the Colts because he was with them last season, and that would be a good re-sign for the Colts because he was a very large part of that defense, huge contributor, and the Colts would love to have him back. And they definitely have the cap space to make the move there, and the Ravens would probably have to do some shifting around or backload a multi-year deal for him because they wouldn't be able to sign him to the amount of money that they have now that he would want.
Yeah, it'd be nice to see him go to Baltimore. That not looking super likely, but I would like it. Next up is Russell Okung. My fit for him would be the Cincinnati Bengals. Last year we saw Joe Burrow was one of the most pressured quarterbacks, and it resulted in him tearing his ACL. And they did address the need for offensive tackles. In the draft, a lot of people thought they were going to take Penei Sewell. They didn't, but they did get 2 offensive tackles. I still think you need to buff up that interior O-line, because tackles can't do all the work. Also, if those guys don't end up panning out, because one of them was a 4th-round draft pick, and, it's very likely that the 4th-round draft pick isn't going to be anything crazy, you would like some veteran help that can, boost the middle of the line.
One thing that sort of bothered me about how the Bengals went about last season was that they just didn't seem to make any adjustments to help Joe Burrow during the season last year. So they were throwing the ball like 40 times a game, and they were just letting guys get to him. If I was Zach Taylor, I would start running the ball more often and start developing a run game, which they really didn't have, which would have helped him stay on his feet more.
Yeah, Joe Mixon was very quiet last year.
Mixon was quiet, and there was just not a lot of coaching adjustments. So I think that a mix of maybe an adjustment this offseason just in how their scheme goes, plus I like that I like the player to the Bengals because they need all the veteran support they need on the offensive line there. I think that a mixture of those two things will definitely be important for them.
Yeah, so kind of going off of that, we have Richard Sherman. And for him, I have a good fit being the Pittsburgh Steelers. And even though he's old, I still wouldn't mind him. I wouldn't mind seeing him on the team because right now we have Joe Hayden, and as he's also old, like Sherman, he was still a top player in his position last season. And even though Sherman might not be able to do the same as Joe Hayden, I could still see him as a pretty good leader. For maybe 1 or 2 years, I wouldn't like seeing him there for a long time, but I think a couple years, I could see him doing pretty good. So
Richard Sherman is old. He was hurt all last season. I really don't. He's not going to be great. He was hurt for a large portion of last season. He had 6 tackles the entire season. He had 2 picks. He's not going to be a good player for the Steelers. If I were you, I wouldn't really want him on the team.
But
he got hurt though.
He's also not going to be the type of guy. I think it could be a good fit because he's not going to be the type of guy you have to waste a bunch of money on. He's going to be a guy that can fill the
fill the empty spot.
That's true. He'll be cheap, but he's not going to be someone who's going to be. He's not going to step into a spot he's not going to play like he did 2-3 seasons ago. So.
Staying with the secondary, our next free agent is Malik Hooker, and I'm going with the Ravens as my fit. It killed me last year watching Deshaun Elliott and Chuck Clark blow all these deep balls, especially that McCole Hardman one in the Chiefs game. Chuck Clark is a good defensive general, but for Deshaun Elliott, like other than his tackling, which was phenomenal, last year flashback to him putting Derrick Henry on his knees. He's really not that great of a coverage guy. He can tackle and he's a very aggressive player, but as far as covering the guys, he did let up a lot last year. And I think that having Malik Hooker would help, you stop the balls over top, which killed them last year.
I think there's a few things to keep in mind, though, there. That last season was really Deshaun Elliott's first full season that he had played, so I think this season he'll definitely take a large jump up from where he was last year. I would almost see a better fit for him to be maybe the 49ers, just because they have, as we were talking about in earlier episodes, they have a really good offense, and their defense has really been their weak spot, and especially their defensive secondary. And I think that if they're able to add a solid veteran player to their defensive secondary, that could really help them win more games this season.
All right, so moving on from secondary and going on to a tackle, I have Mitchell Schwartz, and I have a good fit for him being the Titans because after last season, they actually let go Dennis Kelly, which I think surprised pretty much everyone, as he was a pretty good player for them, and no one knew why they released him. But as of right now, they have Kendall Lamb and Ty Sambrailo, who are two backups. Right now, they're set to battle it out for the position, so I think Schwartz could be a good step in, as he's a veteran and knows the game, unlike two backups. So I could see him being a good fit for on Titans.
Imagine that offense too with a really good offensive line and then Derrick Henry, and then you already know you have A.J. Brown, so you have a good passing attack there too.
Possibly
Yeah,
Julio if he...
Yeah, we were talking about Julio.
That's unstoppable.
That would
Unstoppable
be
right there.
a great offense. But going back to the defensive side, the last player we're going to talk about is Olivier Vernon, and I think that Vernon is a really interesting player to talk about. He's a good player, but he still needs to prove that he's able to play through an entire season because he's battled with injuries throughout his career, and he's really had an up and down career statistically. He's had really good seasons. His last season, he had a great season, 9 sacks, 16 quarterback hits. But the issue with him is that over his 9-year career, a lot of his years have been injury-plagued or very poor seasons. So because of this, I think that a good team for him would probably be a team who's building up right now. So probably I would put him with the New York Jets. And playing under new defensive-minded head coach Robert Saleh would allow for him to do really well and thrive in that defense. And also playing in a place where he knows that he'll get a lot of playing time is important for him so that he can get potentially a better contract the season that follows, because they'll probably sign him to a 1-year deal anywhere he goes. He's not really a multi-year player at this point. And the Jets are definitely in desperate need of literally every single position on the football field, so Vernon would definitely be able to step in there and help immediately. But another team who I would put him as maybe interested in him are the Ravens, who, as I said earlier, are in desperate need of pass rush help. But the only thing here is that the Ravens need a very durable player because they're a team who has the potential to make a run into the postseason and make a deep run into the postseason, so they can't really afford any players who are very extremely injury prone like Vernon is. So
you don't need another Jimmy Smith out.
You don't. Jimmy Smith is a good example of that he gets hurt about every season. So I think that just going with pass rushers, Houston is definitely the way to go if they're able to sign Justin Houston, but Vernon could definitely be a good second signing if they aren't able to get him.
Switching topics here to what we want our individual teams to do before the season starts. For me, like we've already talked about so much, I want to see them sign another pass rusher and also find a safety. Like, you don't have to sign one, but you did draft a lot of secondary help. And you just got to figure out, who's going to be able to, lock down the medium, deep routes. I think that if you add a veteran pass rusher, that takes away kind of the fear of not. We don't know how Owe is gonna do. He has a lot of potential, but if you get a guy like Houston, then or Vernon, like you said, then until we know what Owe can do, they can kind of hold down the fort.
Yeah, I sort of like the ideas that you were bringing up. First, just talking about the safety, they drafted a guy in the 3rd round, Brandon Stevens, who's listed as a cornerback. But in all of the press conference that they've done, they've really talked about how they like him as a potential safety backup and just being in that safety mix, just because of his play style and his athleticism. And he is actually a player who in college played running back, and he transferred to being cornerback. So that transition just showed how athletic he is and how just in a few years he's able to make it to the NFL from such a drastic position change from playing on the offense to playing in the defensive secondary. So I think he'd definitely be able to transition just from being corner to being safety, because that switch isn't really as difficult as changing from running back to being cornerback. So I think that Stevens could definitely be a good option there. And then talking about getting a pass rusher, I think that that's super important, just because, not even because of the Owe situation, just because that group is just so young anyway. They don't really have anyone in that group who is the veteran guy. Tyus Bowser is really the veteran guy. I guess Pernell McPhee is, but he's not really a good player. So if you could get a really good veteran pass rusher, I think that would be really important. Another guy who we hadn't mentioned before, Melvin Ingram, could be a good signing, but again, he's injury question there. But I think overall Houston is by far the best player to help them, just because he's durable and he could definitely still get double-digit sacks for the Ravens. And I just think that with Houston there, he'll be able to help Owe, Hayes, Madubuike develop into better pass rushers for the team. Andrew, how about the Steelers? What do you want for them?
Yes, moving on to the Steelers. Honestly, I would feel pretty good if we picked up any offensive line players. At this point right now, we have DeCastro and we have Matt Filer, who came back to Pittsburgh after last season. Besides that, we have no one. We have backups. We have injured players from last year. We have Zach Banner, who's coming back healthy, so he should be a pretty good one. But after last season, we got rid of our offensive coordinator, who we should have fired a good 2 seasons ago. So I liked that move in the off season.
You also fired your offensive line coach, didn't you?
We did.
Yeah, so that'll be an interesting transition to have 4 guys who have never started in the NFL
and a new coach.
That'll be interesting.
But our offensive coordinator coach, I really like. He coached at Maryland, at Penn State, at Pitt, at a bunch of other schools, and I really like him. I also think that we should work on our run game. We got Najee Harris in the draft, but I don't think he'll be able to do anything without an offensive line. So we definitely got to help out Najee with a couple of new line guys, and we'll see how that goes.
I think that's going to be your key to the playoffs. You figure out that O-line, you're chilling.
Yeah, because last season, really the Steelers, for the first 11 games, they sort of got by not running the ball at all. A lot of short passes, and once teams figured out that they had no intention of running the ball, as soon as they locked down the short pass game, the Steelers had absolutely no offense. That's why they couldn't really proceed into the future of the season last year.
And you could see it on Ben.
Yeah,
it was
100%.
wearing him down.
Oh yeah,
100%.
definitely. He cannot throw the ball 50. And also Villanueva even said that too when he came to the Ravens. He was saying how awful that system was just for even just wearing down offensive linemen and wearing down the entire offense, just because it's hard to throw the ball 50 times in a game.
What we want from our teams now during the season, I'm sticking with the theme of pass rush. I finally want them to be able to get pressure on the QB. There was a huge span of games last year where they just did nothing, and they didn't really heat up until the end when they needed to. But almost equal to that, I want them to actually have a passing attack that doesn't finish last place.
Yep.
You're not, like, we've been talking about how dangerous, like, you need to be a three-dimensional team in the NFL. Like, if you can only run the ball, like, the Ravens can run well, but that's going to get shut down in the playoffs by good teams. So you need to be able to, have multiple attack systems. And, I think I trust, I don't know if I trust him, but Greg Roman, he's working on the scheme.
I trust him.
I mean, he's good with the run. We'll have to see if
getting
he can fix the passing attack. But I think they definitely are trying to address it with I think the pick of Bateman in the first was very smart.
Andrew, I'd be really curious why you trust Greg Roman.
I mean, I just trust him because he's under Harbaugh, and at this point, seeing last season and the season before with the Ravens, I trust anyone under John Harbaugh because he's kind of shaped them into better people and just better in the league.
One thing, though, that I would just say about Harbaugh and Tomlin is that they are both very loyal
True.
to assistants who are not good coaches. And I would say that Harbaugh is a little bit too loyal to Greg Roman. And I think in the past, actually, Harbaugh had been a little bit more cruel, firing like Cam Cameron in the year that they won the Super Bowl. In the middle of that season, they fired their offensive coordinator.
That was like mid-December also.
Yeah, and they put Jim Caldwell in.
So do you think Harbaugh will fire him if needed, or is he too loyal? Loyal to him?
I don't think that he'll fire him just because. Yeah, I think that because Cam Cameron was just sort of like a guy who was there, but Greg Roman really helped develop the new system to how it is. But I don't really think that Greg Roman has what it takes to be a successful offensive coordinator in this league, especially because he doesn't really know how to develop a passing offensive scheme. And as we've seen over the past few years, everything that he's tried doesn't work. And it's not really necessarily because of the players. They have decent players. They have the players to be able to have a decent passing attack, but they just don't. Nothing that he's doing is really working in that sense. So
Greg Roman calling passing plays is like asking Madden in a video game. That's useless.
We'll play one call.
Yeah, so I would say that Harbaugh is loyal to him, but I don't trust Roman to be able to fix it. But just going to what I would want for the Ravens to do this season, I sort of agree with everything that Will said. The pass rush was not good last year. Judon and Ngakoue were both pretty much non-factors on the defense. And in order to compete and go far into the playoffs, you need to get after the quarterback and to be disruptive on the defensive line. And I think that really, just going back to last year, Judon and Ngakoue's best games were against the worst teams. So they had a good game against Jacksonville. They had a good game against the Giants.
Mm-hmm.
So they were really being able to disrupt when the competition wasn't good. What they need to be able to do is disrupt against good teams.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going to need to get at the quarterback against the Browns, against the Steelers, which they didn't really do very well last season. And hopefully Odafe Owe will be able to turn into a dominant player, and hopefully they'll also be able to add a vet. And I also agree with your point about the offense that I was talking about with Roman. The passing attack has to be better this year so that teams can't stack the box to stop the offense. What defenses have been doing, we're putting guys in the middle of the field to try to stop the run game, and they were daring them to throw the ball and daring them to call throwing plays, which just can't happen. They need to have a balanced passing attack. And one more thing that I really want to mention and I really want to see from the Ravens this season is offensive line stability. Because last season we saw too many different starting lineups with injuries and other replacements on the offensive line, and all of the shifting around the starting guys did not help the offense succeed. That really hindered them. And I'd love it for the majority of the season to see everyone healthy. And if the line could be Stanley at left tackle, Cleveland or Powers at left guard, Bozeman at center, Zeitler at left guard, or right guard rather, and Villanueva at right tackle, I think that stability there will be the foundation of the offense. And if that can stay sort of in one spot, the offense will have the best chance for success. Because as we even saw in the playoffs last year against the Bills, Tyree Phillips was a mess. Again, in that play in the red zone where he completely just
where him and Dobbins missed the Hollywood. That would have been a touchdown,
Yeah.
not a pick six the other way on the next play.
Yeah, as long as they have stability there, they can go far, I think.
I wouldn't even be upset. Like, I think it would be very smart to just get a few of the remaining, offensive linemen that are left in free agency, just because you really don't, like, if one of them goes down, like, you're kind of screwed. There's such a huge drop from the starters to backups, and it really killed them last year.
Especially, I think, on the tackle spot. I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
that they'd be fine if a guard goes down because they do have Powers who played decent last season.
He was alright.
But, decent for a backup. Like,
Yeah.
he could come in and play. He knows how to play.
Mhm.
But if you have a guy like Villanueva or Stanley go down again, say Stanley goes down again,
Yeah.
because Stanley's been a little injury prone. Villanueva would shift to left, and you would have, now because Fluker's not there, you would have Phillips as your right tackle. And as we saw last season, unless there's some drastic improvement, Phillips is not a very good right tackle. Hopefully, I really hope that Phillips would improve because I would like to see him, because he definitely, just the size of the player, he has potential just from that point. But he needs to improve drastically before he can be in every single play as the tackle.
So would you ever consider picking up the guy who I talked about earlier, Schwartz from the Titans, because he's a free agent right now as right tackle,
I mean,
and he's pretty good, and he's a vet.
if they hadn't picked up Villanueva, yes, but they would have to pay Schwartz too much. I would much rather them say, let's go back before the Villanueva signing. It's either, in my mind, you sign Villanueva and potentially then have room for a pass rusher, or you sign Schwartz and don't have room for anyone else. And I would definitely have rather sign Villanueva with room to potentially also sign Houston.
All right, so going off of the Ravens and going on to the Pittsburgh Steelers, the biggest thing that I have is for the Steelers to figure out their run game. Last season, we probably ran the ball a good 5 times a game, which clearly did not work. I don't know how we got to week 11-0, as I thought we would be a good 3-game winning streak and lose every single game after that. That did not happen for some odd way, but I didn't mind it. After other teams kind of figured out our throw game, which was run a slant every single time, 3 yards down the field, we had no other way to score on the field. So I think that was a lot of our offensive coordinator, because he wouldn't really let Ben throw the ball, and we all know Ben can throw the ball if he has protection and he has guys down the field.
I don't know about that.
You don't think he can throw the ball down the field?
He can throw the ball, but it comes back to him not having to do it every play.
Correct.
Like, he can.
I don't think- I don't-
That's what I'm saying. If we could get a run game going, like 2 seasons ago and like 3 seasons ago, and like the history of the Pittsburgh Steelers, we've almost always had a run game until last season. So I think if we start running the ball and we give Ben's arm a break, I think then he can throw downfield. I'm not saying he can throw down 50 yards downfield every single time like last season.
I think his arm strength is to the point where he's just throwing goose eggs at this point, just because, like, his elbow, just I watched some like analysis of him, and his throwing motion has just changed to the fact where he's just short arming a lot of these balls just because his arm really can't handle it. And I don't know, it could be just because they're having him throw way too much, but also I just think it's because he's aging. He had that elbow surgery. I think a lot of that adding up isn't going to allow him to be able to throw the ball downfield really at all, accurately and well with good throw power. So
Well,
yeah, that's why you need a good running game.
I'm gonna keep faith in my QB a little bit, but also
That's why you need a running
yes,
game.
but also our promoting of Matt Canada to offensive coordinator, I really liked, because when he was a coach at Maryland, he actually coached Anthony McFarland Jr., who is now one of our running backs, and he also coached 8 different colleges, and at I believe 6 out of those 8 colleges, he ran a pretty good run game. So I would love to see him get to know Najee Harris and work in Anthony McFarland Jr. Into the run game more, as last year he got about 2 runs a game, and they kept taking him out for some reason. But I would love to see the connection between the Maryland guys, the offense coordinator, and McFarland Jr. So I think the run game is the biggest thing for the Steelers to figure out.
If they can figure that out, they'll definitely have
Yeah.
a chance to win a lot more games.
Yep.
But as we talked about earlier, it might be a little tougher for them to figure it out because they don't have as much offensive line help.
All right, guys, that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the 2v1 podcast. I'm Will Tannenbaum with Henry Geller and Andrew Riemann, and we will see you in the next episode.